Uh, welcome to welcome to another talk in the colloquium series. Today we have Professor Reetika Khera with us. She is an economist and assistant professor at IIT Delhi. Her work involves questions around nutrition, education, employment, and food security. Her title today would be The Food or Cash Question, Evidence on the Revival of the PDS and People's View. I welcome Professor Khera to come up to the stage and give the talk.
Okay, cool. Okay, so thanks for inviting me to give this talk. It's always a pleasure to have a new audience, although at least some people here have heard me give this talk before, so I apologize to them already. I'm glad you clarified. At IIT Delhi, where I teach, people are very particular about whether you're assistant or associate or professor. So you're either assistant professor or associate professor, or you're professor. I'm assistant professor. I don't want to be misrepresented as being more senior than I am. I think I'm getting the IIT disease. Okay, so what I'm going to do is actually talk mainly about the PDS and the functioning of it, and a little bit about what people's views are on the question of replacing in-kind transfers from the PDS with cash transfers. But before I get into that, I suppose it makes sense to talk a little bit about the National Food Security Act, which is now sitting with the Standing Committee on Food after being tabled in Parliament in the December session last year. So basically the Food Security Act was something that the government of, the Congress party promised in its 2009 manifesto. And the way, I'm not going to talk about the entire journey, but the way it stands right now, there are certain things which are obviously very problematic about it, but there are also some good and sensible things in it. So I'll just give you a broad overview of what the bill has at the moment. A lot of people criticize it for not doing enough, and a lot of others criticize it for doing too much. So it's really difficult to find what it is that the Act should or should not try to fix. The way it has been envisioned at the moment is to take a life cycle approach to food security. Again, I won't get into the debate about what exactly food security means. For some people, it means also talking about trade and production issues. But this bill doesn't talk about trade or production. It basically talks about the distributional aspects. And what it does is that it says that the food requirements of an individual vary over his or her life cycle. And therefore, we will take a life cycle approach to food security. We will think in this act separately about children under the age of 6, children in the age group 6 to 14, adults, pregnant and lactating mothers, and so on. In the initial vision of the Right to Food campaign, at least, the bill also included pensions for the elderly, because these people have special needs, and also because, especially for widowed women who are living alone at that age, they need cash supplements because nobody really wants to take care of them anymore. Not everyone, obviously, but there's a substantial chunk who are treated badly. So the bill takes a life cycle approach to food security. It has different programs for different age groups. It also has a combination of in-kind transfers and of cash transfers. So the way the in-kind transfers are working is in the form of the midday meal program, where children who go to government schools will be entitled at least to one meal. And of course, the PDS is one big in-kind transfer. And then the cash transfers are things like the maternity entitlement scheme, where pregnant and lactating mothers will be given 1,000 rupees, I think, for 6 months, so that they're able to meet their additional requirements in this phase of their life. Like I said, it also included pensions, which have, so the widow pensions are still there, which is obviously a cash transfer, but old age pensions have been chucked out because it was becoming too much financially for the government. So that's what the bill is looking like at the moment. Is there's this life cycle approach, a whole bunch of government schemes that are related to food and nutrition are part of it. So for children under in the 0 to 6 age group, there is the Integrated Child Development Services Scheme, which is basically the Anganwadis where children are supposed to get supplementary nutrition, but also a few other services like preschool education, some health referral services, growth and monitoring of these kids, also immunization in some states. So very basic healthcare kind of stuff. Then there is the midday meal program, there's the public distribution system, and then these cash transfers that I just mentioned. So in this context, what has come up, especially in the past 3 years is, should we really try to continue with providing food security through the public distribution system? That isn't it time that we give up on this program because it's just been such a big disaster. I mean, that's the popular perception of this program. If you speak to many urban middle class sort of people, there are two things they'll tell you about the PDS. One is that it's leaky. There is a lot of corruption. The grain is not reaching the poor. That's one thing. The second thing they'll tell you is that the poor are being left out. People who have boleros and multi-storied homes are the ones who get the food, and the poor are actually denied of benefits through the PDS. That's the two things that are, very well known in the public. But I think a lot of this has to be examined continuously. I think certainly there are still states where this is an issue, and one needs to deal with these issues. But also in many states, things have been changing in the past few years, and this is what I propose to do, is to talk a little bit about the changes that we have been seeing on a few of the parameters on which the PDS can be evaluated. So basically the idea is that PDS is corrupt and leaky. Let's just, we can't be bothered with it anymore, and let's try out something new. Let's try cash transfers. And especially with this idea that UID is going to fix everything, people feel that cash transfers, are really worth giving a try now, because at least the corruption problem will be dealt with. Some people actually even argue, funnily enough, that UID will help us fix the problem of identifying the poor, as if our biometrics can tell anyone about our socio-economic status. So at least for the identification of the correct identification of the poor, the UID can't do anything, but perhaps for protection from corruption, it may have something to do. It may have something to contribute, and I'll talk about this later on if there's time, but this is really not the topic of the talk today. First we'll talk a little bit about how one can think of evaluating the PDS. And obviously there are many different ways of doing it. I've only listed a few, and I've listed these because these are the things on which we have some sort of data, and some of these are things that I've actually looked at the data, and I can tell you what I've found. So one is, just very simple basics. What is the proportion of the population that is actually able to access grain from the PDS? That's very important. How many people are we able to reach? That's one thing, that's coverage. The second is leakage, which we all know is, how much of the grain that goes from the central government to the state government, how much of it is actually reaching the households who are covered by the PDS. That's the second. The third is, so it gets more interesting as we go along. The third is implicit subsidy from the PDS. Yeah, the PDS, what is the PDS doing? I assume that everyone knows about it, but basically the government will provide at least wheat and or rice at a subsidized price, which is lower almost always than the market price. In some states, actually, the PDS goes beyond wheat and rice, and it also provides pulses, oil, in some states even semolina, soap, sugar, yeah, sugar and kerosene, of course. Sugar, I don't think as being particularly good for our nutrition, so I tend to just forget about it. It's pretty damaging, even for the poor whose sugar consumption levels may be quite low, but actually sugar is to be taken with a pinch of salt or whatever. Okay, so implicit subsidy is basically if you're getting 20 kilos from the PDS and you're paying 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 rupees for it, how much would you have had to pay if you had to buy the same quantity from the market? How much is the government subsidizing you by providing it to you at a lower price? So I'll look a little bit at that. Exclusion errors are actually quite important, and I'm sorry I may not have the slide on that, although I have the data, and if there's time I can pull it out for you. But exclusion error basically refers to the proportion of the poor who are left out of the PDS. Yeah, so if you are, you know, however questionable the government's poverty line may be, what proportion of those who live before that government's poverty line are actually being, have not been able to get classified as BPL, as below poverty line, and are therefore not getting BPL ration cards and not getting PDS grain. So exclusion error is when a poor person gets classified as non-poor and is therefore denied benefits, and that has also changed quite a bit in the past 5 years. And finally, the most interesting, I mean, why are we running this PDS is because we have a big undernutrition problem in the country. Of course, much of research in medical sciences, nutrition, economics has shown very clearly that if you want to fix nutrition, then really the age group to target is 0 to 3, at most 0 to 6. By the age of 6, your nutrition map is sort of set. So you need to target mothers who are pregnant and lactating and children before they reach the age of 6 at most. So in a sense, PDS is, you know, the provision of the PDS is already missing the boat. But by contributing to the family pot, it is adding to food security of that population, and therefore it may have some sort of ripple effects into the child nutrition, undernutrition problem. So that's really the most interesting question, and that's the one I'm not going to be able to answer today because it's also the most difficult to trace because there are so many different channels through which nutritional outcomes are affected, but that's what I'm working on at the moment. In case I run out of time, let me tell you what I'm going to say about the PDS. Two things. One is that there are huge interstate variations today in the country in the performance of the PDS on at least the first 4 parameters that I've listed here. And the other thing is that there has been a lot of change between 2004-05 and 2009-10 in the performance of the PDS across these states. So today, to be able to make one grand statement about the PDS is going to be quite difficult because the PDS in Bihar is very different even from the PDS in Jharkhand today, and they used to be almost the same 5 years ago. So I think one has to be very careful about where one is talking about and at what point of time one is making these statements. Yeah, and the choice of years, in case you're interested, you know, why I picked 2004-05 and 2009-10, because much of the data on the PDS is coming from the National Sample Survey data sets, and the last thick round for which we have data is from the 66th round, which pertains to 2009-10, and the one just before that was the 2004-05 data set. So I'm using those data sets, but I'm also using primary data which we collected in May, June 2011 last year. Yeah, because we were able to see in the secondary data sets that something was moving and changing in all these states. But obviously, one likes to be a little bit careful about relying only on government data sets entirely because, you know, one doesn't really know how it has been collected. So we did a small survey in 9 states in 2011. So, okay. So the evidence of the revival can be seen on coverage, leakages, and implicit subsidies. So I'll talk a little bit about those. What you find? You find that as far as coverage is concerned, in 2004-05, 73% of households got not a single grain from the PDS. Yeah, this is all rural data, by the way. I should qualify because I'm really concerned with rural areas. It's possible to do exactly the same thing for urban areas as well. I've just not done it. I mean, I have not bothered to look at it very carefully, even though the numbers are there. So in 2004-5, 3/4 of the population almost was not getting anything from the PDS, and that proportion has now come down to 55%. Yeah, so that's at the all India level. That's I think not an insubstantial change. I think it's something to think about. And then you can see the interstate variations already. Yeah. No. The full population. This is what is really interesting, is that if you take the full, so this is a nationally representative data set. Of all rural households in 2004-5, 3/4 got nothing. Only 27% were getting some grain, and that has increased to 45. No. So according to me, everyone should be eligible. And see the eligibility. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about eligibility. How does the eligibility work? The way the government has structured it is that they say that according to NSS data for 1993-94, using our official poverty lines, these are the proportion of, this is the proportion of population that is poor in each state. Okay, so in Tamil Nadu, 40% are poor, in Bihar, 80% are poor. I'm just making up those numbers. So then they say, okay, fine. If 80% are poor in Bihar, then we'll take today's population for Bihar, or actually the 2001 census population for Bihar, and we'll give grain for 80% of the population. The next step is, so that tells the state how much grain it's going to get. The next step is that the state will have to go out and identify those 80%. And there have been BPL surveys, below poverty line surveys, which have been pretty badly messed up. But for instance, the 2002 BPL survey, it had a 13-point criteria. They said, look at the house, look at their educational level, look at whether they migrate or not, how many of their children go to school or don't go to school. And so there are these 13 parameters. Look at the number of clothing they have. That's my favorite one. Like go into the house and count ek ghagra, do ghagra kind of a thing. So as you can imagine, these surveys ran into lots of problems in the implementation stage, but also conceptually there are some issues. And thirdly, people move in and out of poverty. So even if you get your criteria and your implementation perfectly right, tomorrow if somebody dies in my family, my economic status changes and I may yet be misclassified, okay? So that's the eligibility. I mean, that's a very fraught debate, so I don't want to go there because that also is a separate talk. So we just assume that the entire population is eligible. We find that by now I mean 2009-10, 45% get something. In some states, there has been very impressive improvement, and I'm sure everyone has heard about Chhattisgarh by now. So in, Chhattisgarh has gone from being around the national average to being much below the national average in terms of exclusion of the population. Similarly, in Orissa, there has been a remarkable improvement, and these states are interesting. I mean, these things have happened in some of the other states as well, but these states are interesting to pick out because these are really states that are generally considered basket cases, where you wouldn't imagine that Jharkhand could get anything right, but even there something is moving, and I'll talk a little bit about what is moving to explain that. This one is basically about leakages from the PDS. So let me quickly explain how the leakages are calculated. From the Food Ministry in Delhi, you have information on how much grain was taken by each state government for the purpose of the PDS. Yeah? And then from the National Sample Survey, they go to households and they ask them in the past 30 days, how much have you bought from the PDS? So for rice, they have like 500 items for which they collect information. For rice, they have PDS rice and other rice. For wheat, they have PDS wheat and other wheat. So it's separated and you can figure out how much people have got. And therefore, you know how much is reaching the poor out of that total. So if you scale that up, then you get an estimate of this is what the state got for the purpose of the PDS. This is what people got. If those two numbers match, that means there was no leakage. But if those two numbers don't match, the larger the discrepancy, the bigger the amount of leakage you would imagine. So I'm only reporting data for the 9 states in which we did our own survey as well. So the national average leakages went from 54% to 41%, yeah, in this same time period. Obviously, I mean, 41% leakage is hardly something to be happy about or to feel, you know, everything is all right. But still, like I said, it's always worthwhile to look at the state-wise data because there is just so much variation across the country. So let's start at the unhappy end, that's Bihar, where in 2004-05, so the lighter bars are 2004-05 and the darker ones are the more recent data from 9-10. In Bihar, 90% did not reach into 2004-05, and that's come down to 75%. Yeah, so it's pretty grim still. And then as you come along to this side, you come to Tamil Nadu, where whether it's 2004-05 or 9-10, things have been pretty good. Yeah, it's less than 10% leakages. The really interesting ones, like I said, are Chhattisgarh from 51 or 52% down to about 10%. And then again, is this Orissa? Yeah, it should be. Yeah, so 75 to 30%. Yeah, so there has been like, now that's something I would feel pretty, yeah, even though I agree that 30% is hardly some rate of leakage that one could be okay with, it at least shows you that in the span of 5 years, you can achieve quite a bit if you get things right. And I'll talk about what it is that you have to get right. The third thing which we have done is to look at implicit subsidy. Yeah, so implicit subsidy is basically the difference between market price and PDS price multiplied by the quantity you actually get from the PDS, not what you're entitled to. If you're entitled to 35 and you get only 20, you will multiply by 20. Yeah. So what you find that at the all India level, okay, so there's actually, are there many economists here? Okay, so if you want, so you know, I can just quickly mention it, that what is the market price? What is the relevant market price to use here? Because obviously the market grain may be slightly better quality than PDS grain, and therefore, if you evaluate it at the market price, you might be exaggerating the subsidy, right? You have that concern that you're not comparing like with like and you're inflating the subsidy. So what we have done to account for that is to not use average price, but to use the median price. And in fact, we've also tried it with the price paid by the 25th percentile. So we're looking at the price that is paid really by the poorest sort of segment to do this evaluation. Yeah, and the good thing is that the numbers don't change very dramatically, so we are not biasing the results in our favor in any way. So at the all India level, if you look at all households, the average subsidy is 26 rupees per household, no, per capita, I think. I've forgotten. And then I've also done the calculations only for PDS households, which are households who get something from the PDS, not eligible, but are actually reporting positive purchases from the PDS. So if you look at that subset, the subsidy is obviously much higher because you're chucking out all the observations that are zeros. Yeah. And then in Tamil Nadu, of course, it's much higher. It's 107 for all households and 113 for only PDS households. And the gap over here is very small because in Tamil Nadu, remember, it's a universal PDS. So the number of observations that you chuck out is like really small. It's like 8% or 10%, something like that. No, per month. Yeah. I think it's per capita, but I've forgotten now what my calculations were. Yeah. And then the next thing that we've done, yeah, so now we know how much we are transferring to the poor through the PDS. So the next logical step is to see how much of an impact this transfer has on poverty rates. Yeah. So if I'm below the poverty line in Tamil Nadu and I get 100 rupees from the PDS as an implicit transfer, does it mean that I cross the poverty line? Do I become non-poor because of it? So you're looking at the poverty impact of the PDS through these implicit transfers. And we don't do it for the headcount ratio, but we do it for the poverty gap. So what we say is that if on average I was 100 rupees away from the poverty line, because of this PDS transfer, how much closer do I move to the poverty line? How much less is the gap between me and the poverty line on account of these implicit transfers? And so what we find is that it's about, this is the proportionate reduction in the poverty gap. So it's about 1/5 of the gap gets wiped out because of implicit transfers at the all India level. And then again, you see this usual pattern, very high in Tamil Nadu, about 61%. Chhattisgarh was also quite impressive, and only 4% in Bihar. And this is small because of many reasons. One is that the market price and the PDS price may not be that far from each other. The second component is that your quantity, the quantity you buy is very small in Bihar as well. Yeah? So all those things are making it a smaller number in terms of poverty reduction. And this just shows, oh no, you can't see it very well. Can you see the two lines, the blue and the red? Yeah, okay. So I can't see it. Okay, so the blue is the original monthly per capita distribution, yeah? And the red is the one after you have added the implicit transfer, yeah? So you find that it's moving, yeah? It's gone from here to here. And in the case of Tamil Nadu, the distribution, the two before and after distributions are quite distinct, and that really shows you that 60% reduction in the poverty gap. In the case of the all India distribution, you know, it's much closer, which is about 18% that I showed. Yeah, so this is just a graphic representation of what I just showed you in the previous slide. So that's as far as the PDS goes. Now, the other thing we were obviously very concerned about is, you know, the cash alternative. Is that, you know, do we really want to go there? And we thought we have a certain understanding of these issues, but it's worth finding out directly what people think about this and what is the reason they give one way or the other. So the question we asked, I don't know if you want me to go through the Hindi, but I'll just tell you quickly what we asked them. We said, suppose the government tells you we're going to shut down the ration shop. We'll open a bank account for you. We'll put money every month in your bank account such that you can buy the same quantity from the market. The same bundle that you're getting from the PDS, you will be able to purchase from the market at market prices. And this money will be indexed. Yeah, so we'll take into account inflationary pressures. What do you feel about this kind of idea? And the results that we got were very, like, it's very clear. In those states where the PDS worked well in terms of people actually getting their grain on a regular basis, they just didn't want to hear about cash. They wouldn't even let us finish our question. They'd be like, no, just like putting their hands on their ears and saying, "Aap hamare pet pe laat maar rahe hain," you know, very strong views on this. In the states where it didn't function very well, people were more receptive to the idea of cash. So in Bihar, it was the only state in which a majority, I think 54% said that they would prefer to get cash, whereas in the other states, you know, these numbers are pretty tiny, but the ones who prefer food are very large. So overall, 2/3 of the sample population said that we would prefer to get food. And the only state in which there was this open-hearted welcome for cash was Bihar, and that's because the PDS functions pretty poorly in that state. So for me, actually, these numbers are obviously interesting, but it's even more interesting to see why is it that they gave this or that answer. Yeah, that what was going on in their mind, and because we had very good investigators for our survey, we were able to capture quite a lot of that. I mean, some of it was pre-coded, but there was also a lot of qualitative information, which is what I'm going to present here. So I'll just skip this slide, it's not that interesting. But, one of the most important things, actually, one of the most important things for people is the food security aspect. They say when we get grain, we are at least assured of not having to sleep hungry at night. And that for many of the respondents was still a big concern. And so what I've done is I've just picked out a sample of some of the more evocative quotes from the survey. So this is someone for Chhattisgarh who said 10 years ago when the PDS did not function well, we were forced to sleep hungry, not anymore. Chawal chahiye, paisa kya karenge, chaatenge. Yeah, so he's like, he's very like completely dismissive of cash. Grains can be used even the next month. If cash is in hand, it will be spent on random stuff. So people have quite a nuanced understanding of these things, which I would not have guessed before, that, you know, even if I don't consume my 20 kilos this month, it's not going to go away. It's going to be there for me to consume next month. In Chhattisgarh, this is sort of funny. He says, ration milega to pran bach jayenge, like my life will be saved. Paisa mila to bhukhe mar jayenge. If we did get cash, then we'll just starve of, you know, we'll die of hunger. This Ansari Begum is a widow in Uttar Pradesh. She says, ration milta hai to pet bharta hai. पैसा देंगे तो खा जाएंगे अफसर और आसानी से खत्म हो जाएगा. That if we get food, then we can fill our stomachs, but if we get cash, then we are worried about corruption and you know, it getting spent on other things. So that's a very important concern. The other thing is this indexation question. You know, if you talk to economists, they'll say the people who are opposing cash transfers, one of the reasons why they oppose it is because they say cash, you know, the real value of cash will be eroded over a period of time. But the solution to that is very simple. You just index the amount, and that's the end of this, you know, what's the big deal about that? So actually, even these people understand the issue much better. So in Sirmaur, this person said, सरकार तभी पैसा बढ़ाएगी जब चुनाव होंगे, इसके अलावा नहीं बढ़ाएगी. That what guarantee is there that this amount will be increased on a regular basis? Yeah, and what is the frequency of this going to be in any case? There is no clarity about that. And then Suhasini in Andhra Pradesh says prices will not be stable in the market. It will be very difficult for the government to give us the appropriate amount. Now, anyone who works in data in India knows that price data is actually very, very poor, yeah, and very patchy also. So at the moment, we are not collecting adequate information to be able to do this indexation. And then one has to think about the more complex questions, which is, are you going to index it to the block prices or the district or the state prices? Is it going to be a weekly indexation or a monthly or a yearly or a 5-yearly, as this person in Sirmaur says? So these are not as simple as they're made out to be. I think if one thinks hard enough, maybe one can come up with an adequate solution, but it's really not quite as simplistic as it's made out to be. The third thing that people talked about is that markets are very poorly developed. Yeah, that in rural areas. So again, economists might say that, you know, the reason why markets don't exist in rural India is because people don't have purchasing power. And that once you put money in their hands, the markets will automatically start springing up. And I think to some extent it is true. Like, you know, if you set up a university here, you will find slowly, you know, one cafe coffee day will open nearby, and then some Pizza Hut may come up, or whatever it is, yeah. So it's not necessary that the markets won't develop. But equally possible, especially in rural areas, is that markets will not develop, that those who already have an entry into the market, yeah, they have the first mover's advantage, they may actively block the entry of more people. They may create artificial storage, artificial shortages in that local market. They may cause inflation, yeah. So these are the things that some of the people talked about. So if we don't get rice at the PDS, we will be exploited by the Marwadis. I mean, she says Marwadis, but it's not actually like a slur on the Marwadis. But even more interesting is Rajendra from Jharkhand, because he's drawing on his own experience, his real life experience to answer this question. So in Jharkhand, you're supposed to get 35 kilos from the PDS, yeah? And the way they were doing it is they were giving 25 rice and 10 wheat, because Jharkhand is mainly a rice eating state. And then at some point, they decided we're not going to give wheat, we'll give all 35 rice. And so he says that जब तक PDS से गेहूं मिल रहा था, until such time that the 10 kilos of wheat was coming, बाजार में गेहूं 10 से 12 रुपए का था, अब 20 रुपए का है. So he can already see that when the PDS wheat withdrew from the system, actually market prices of wheat did go up a little bit. So that's one aspect. Another one is the access to banks question. They are far, their density is very poor, and these people, a lot of them are illiterate or at least quite vulnerable, and so they bring up all these concerns. I'll quickly go through because they illustrate the different aspects of this problem quite well. Bank जाने में 10 रुपए. Is there anyone who understands no Hindi at all? Yeah? Okay, so then I'll keep translating as we go along. But I will read it in Hindi once. बैंक जाने में 10 रुपए लगेंगे और बाजार जाने में 20 रुपए, ये कौन देगा? 2 दिन भी खराब हो जाएंगे, मतलब कि दिहाड़ी भी जाएगी. It will take me 10 rupees to go to the bank, 20 to go to the market. Who's going to pay this? I'll also lose 2 days. I'll lose 2 days of work. How is that going to be accounted for? The next person says, so there are these transaction costs that the poor will have to bear. The next person says, हमारे बैंक में सिर्फ एक ही काउंटर है, इतने सारे बीपीएल परिवारों को वो कैसे पैसा देंगे? पैसा मिला तो कचरा हो जाएगा. So he says that my local bank only has one counter, and if they're going to have to deal with everyone in the locality, how are they going to handle this kind of crowd? The third one is from UP. If I go to the bank, they will take my thumbprint on whatever they want, then I will be in trouble. And then in AP, she says, travel hassles, bank is not in the village, also bank officials are unhelpful. I don't find it easy to operate the bank. Since I'm illiterate, I prefer food, shop is closer. We get fixed amount. Then we ask them, okay, suppose we double the amount. Suppose your total bundle is worth 1,000 rupees in the market, we'll give 2,000, ab bolo. Now what do you say? So he says on doubling the cash, he said, traveling all the way from the village to town is a risk. Food security is more important than money. And this really goes back to that food security concern that people have in their minds. And this illiteracy question, I think even illiterate people who can't read and write, they do learn how to manage banking procedures, and they even enjoy it. It becomes I've met some old tribal toothless women in rural Ranchi district, and they all were telling us very sweetly how the chowkidar at the bank was helping them fill out their forms and all that. So it's not as if illiterate people can't do this, or that they will not learn to do it, or they should not have the opportunity to do it. But the point is really that they have certain vulnerabilities because of the position that they're in, and this must be taken into account so that enough safeguards are put in place, or at least one should give due consideration to these concerns. The other thing sort of related to the point that I'm making is that when you ask people a question such as the one we did, that this is a functioning system or non-functioning if you're in Bihar, the PDS, and here is a hypothetical situation. Now you tell us which one, what are your views on these two things? It may be a little bit difficult for people to answer that question, to sort of imagine a new way of doing things. And therefore it may be, that one has to take their responses with a pinch of salt. But what gave us hope is, first of all, in our question, we had the provision for them to say, hey, I just don't get what you're saying. So, if I go back to that table, there's this column which says no clear preference. These are the people, and we find only 15% are not able to really grapple with the issue. So the bulk of them were able to understand, and as you can see, many of them were very articulate also in telling us what they thought. The other thing that gives us hope and makes us feel that this is something to go by is the fact that when we ask them about the alternate scenario, they bring up their own life experiences about other cash transfers. So here they're talking about their experiences with other cash transfers. So if cash is given by the government, I will definitely not get it properly. For instance, already the government has implemented giving money for marriages, pension, etc. In each of these cases, a lot of money is taken away as bribes to middlemen. I will not get the full money. In Chhattisgarh, this tribal, he says, Narega ka paisa to dete nahi, ration ka paisa kaise denge? Is that we don't get our NREG wages regularly. What assurance is there that this money will come? Similarly, this is with respect to pensions. It comes in every 5 or 6 months. Cash for food will also be the same, that it will be very irregular. And finally, this one. He does not trust the government with cash transfers as he has not received his old age pension for the past 12 months. If the same happens with cash for rations, his family will starve. Yeah, so this food security aspect, it's really like this big burden on their head, which is always bothering them. And just before I wrap up, I think there are 1 or 2 more slides to go. There are certain groups that feel especially vulnerable. Yeah, so these are old age, the elderly who can't walk around. So for whom has, this idea of going langrate to the bank, etc., is just unthinkable. Today, they can just give their ration card to somebody and that neighbor will bring their food back for them. In the case of withdrawing your own money from the bank, that becomes more difficult, at least, if not impossible. So there's that lot, which is the second one. Market में चावल मिलना बहुत मुश्किल है. So in the market, in our local market, you don't get rice throughout the year. That's what she is saying. PDS shop opens thrice a week. It is easy to get ration. I'm too old to go and search for rice. That, this idea I'll go to the block office and look for a good shop is too much. And then there's this younger woman who says, अगर पैसा मिला तो सारे निर्णय आदमी लेगा. अब हम लोग अपने आदमी पे पूरा दिन नजर नहीं रख सकते. अगर हमारे आदमी ने बैंक से पैसा निकाल कर खर्च कर दिया तो हम क्या करेंगे? Yeah, that, when money comes into the house, it's really going to create all kinds of things. And it was really interesting that in our survey, there was a mother and daughter, at least one case I know of, because I haven't read every single line in every questionnaire, but this mother and daughter were answering these questions. And the mother was saying, haha, cash, cash. And the daughter is saying, nahi, food. And then they are both fighting and giving galis to each other. Arey, you've lost your mind. You don't understand. If you get cash, then it's going to cause so much trouble. So you have to imagine that when a discussion about this option is leading to so much tension between the mother and daughter, when the money is actually in their hands, then everyone is going to say, wo bacha bolega, I want my textbook. Father will say, well, I don't want to use the cliched example of men will go and drink. But the man will say, no, let's buy a bicycle maybe. And the mother will say maybe food or whatever. Yeah. So it can lead to quite a lot of tension within the family. You get the point I'm making. And the other thing which is sort of interesting, I think, that comes out from the survey is that basically when we talk about this as a policy measure, why do we suggest cash? Because we know that running the PDS is an expensive proposition. Yeah, you have to procure the grain, you have to store it, you have to transport it. It's not cheap, and we have to accept that. The alternative, cash, is perhaps, therefore, going to lead to quite a lot of saving from the point of view of the government, because you don't have to do any of this tamjam and you can just transfer money into people's accounts. So this very interesting woman in Chhattisgarh, Nidra, she picks up on that point. She says, अभी सरकार टेंशन उठाती है, मगर पैसा मिला तो हमें टेंशन उठानी पड़ेगी. राशन की दुकान ही हमारे लिए ठीक है. So she says that, and this came up in the previous ones, that, getting to the market, losing your daily wages for 1 or 2 days or whatever it is, all these costs will be transferred onto us. Yeah. So when we do these calculations, we do have to take into account the transaction costs that are going to be passed on to the poor. And then, having accounted for those, take the debate forward. So I'll stop with that. I'm not sure how much time I had, if I've overshot. Okay, but I'll stop and then I'll answer questions because that's always more interesting. I'm fed up of hearing myself. Okay, so just to conclude, there are good things about the National Food Security Act. There are questionable things, and I can talk about the questionable things since we have time. The second is related, what we can use this time to, is to talk about how this revival has been happening. Yeah, so my first concluding remark is that the revival is for real, but we have a long way to go. This is not at all an acceptable situation still. But if Chhattisgarh can go to 10% leakages, so can the other states. The other thing is, yeah, so some of the fixes are over here. Another thing related to the PDS is that we do need to think about what exactly we want from the PDS. Is it only about wheat and rice? Shouldn't we think about coarse cereals, which are more nutritious? better for Indian agricultural conditions, cheaper than wheat and rice. So there are many reasons to move towards that. And also about decentralization, that, you know, in Karnataka, if they eat a lot of ragi, then why isn't the government providing ragi? In Rajasthan, why shouldn't it be bajra? So let states tailor their PDS a little bit more. It will help to save costs because you will cut down on transportation costs. What was happening until 2004-5 is that about 80% of all procurement of the FCI was happening in Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP. Now that pattern has already started changing. So for instance, Chhattisgarh is buying about 12% of the total rice bought in the entire country. Similarly, in Andhra, it's about 11%. Even Orissa has reached about 8%. Yeah, so it's moving out of that belt, which is good and healthy for Indian agriculture as well. So we can talk if people are interested. And then this whole blind acceptance of cash as a better alternative, I think really does need to be taken, you know, with a lot of ifs and buts, and taking into account ground realities in many parts of rural India. Ideally, maybe one could have thought of, you know, trying these options out in urban areas, because a lot of the things that have brought up are not applicable in urban areas. Markets are reasonably well developed. Even if people are not literate, they do tend to be more assertive, more aware of their rights than in rural areas. And maybe it's possible to make it work in urban areas. But recent experiments in Delhi have not been very encouraging, because I was actually surprised to hear that the 2 surveys that have happened in Delhi, people have brought up the food security concern in Delhi as well. Yeah, so I mean, I of course don't work on urban areas and I don't understand these issues at all. So I feel a bit reluctant to comment on this, but anyway, I thought whatever I know I should share with you. So I'll stop with that. Yeah, and I'm happy to take whatever questions.
All right, the floor is open.
Hang on a second. Wait. I want to write down because I brought something.
Okay, the center is trying to push for cash transfer, and there's a whole debate over that. States, you said, some states are starting to do really well in the PDS. How do you think the state governments are reacting to the cash transfer scheme? How do you think, like Chhattisgarh government, for example, what are their opinions?
Should I take 2 or 3 at a time?
Is about 90% households are getting that rations. So I want to know, is that quality is also good of PDS system, so that people are very frequently getting so?
Okay, shall I quickly answer this till the mic goes there? Okay, views on, do you want me to put this on again? What are the state's views on cash? Different ones have taken a different view. Bihar state government is very keen on cash. Chhattisgarh has completely said no way. They said there's just that in fact, he's given it in writing that he's going to oppose it. Similarly, Tamil Nadu is not in favor of cash. Yeah, so all the state governments are supposed to have responded to the center. I have not seen everyone's comments, but the Himachal Pradesh government is very sweet. They've said, give us cash, but give us food also. so, and I think sometimes I feel like they don't think hard enough. So I actually went and met the officials in Himachal Pradesh and I said, what are you saying? So then they said, oops. And so they were saying that, you know, we may send a follow-up note that perhaps we want to reconsider our position. So I think there are all kinds of states in the basket, some pro and some anti and some ambivalent and some who want it all. Yeah. On why do people want cash? I'm sorry, I should have had a few slides on that. The reason why I don't report on that is because overall it's only 1/3 of the total sample. So in Bihar, so one of the big reasons is that in Bihar is that you give us something, let at least something reach us. That at the moment we are hardly getting anything at all, and they feel we'll just try anything because they're just so desperate. That's one. The second one is that people say, we are poor and we have many needs. So if you give us cash, then we can we can fulfill whatever need we may have. So it could be textbooks, or it could be chappal, or it could be fixing the house, or whatever it is. So the cash is fungible and it can be used the way we want it to be used. Even if it is used only for food, some of the better off households, they say, we get our wheat or rice from our own fields. So what's the point of the government giving us more wheat and rice? If we get cash, then we might buy dal or eggs or whatever, better, more nutritious food. So these are some of the most common arguments in favor of cash. Yeah. The third one is about quality. So quality used to be a very serious concern, as far as I know, in the PDS, at least 10 years ago. People did complain quite a bit. But now also people will complain, but actually I don't think it's as serious as it used to be. And so what happens now is that every once in a while, maybe once in a year or whatever, one bad lot comes, which is really not fit for consumption. Yeah. So in our sample also, we've come across a few households here and there which say, oh, that 6 months ago we had one, what we got was so bad that we could use only 1/4% of it. But the remaining months, it's fair quality. Yeah. There's something called FAQ in the FCI, fair average quality, and that's what they're getting most of the time. No, I don't think so. So for instance, Chhattisgarh, which is now buying from its own state and supplying from what is procured within, they are very happy now because earlier they were getting usna rice and now they're getting arva rice, which they prefer. So, they're really thrilled that we are rid of this usna. It's okay, this is just for entertainment. So you're right that there is obviously going to be variation, but we don't really have that kind of data to be able to say, okay, X% of the grain is bad quality or good quality. Yeah, it is every once in a while people do get bad quality as well. That's all I can say.
And second thing is about Bihar. I feel that corruption is also a thing. Because of that, people prefer cash.
Yeah, that's what I started with. That was the first thing that I said. Yeah.
In the survey, we actually saw which was actually interview based. We saw only the residents interview, the inhabitants of the villages. What about the migrant laborers who go to the urban areas and who cannot avail the facilities of ration? If they have actually bank accounts, they can actually avail this facility and means survive.
Mine question is similar to his. But I feel, isn't this idea is something we are talking, its time has not yet come. Because unless you talk about the financial inclusion and those things, and people are not familiar with their interactions with the banking system and their integration with it, so they perceive it as something which they have not, which is not good for them. So first there should have the financial inclusion sort of thing, and then we can talk about it.
Is there an either or option? Can the option be left to the user? And the second question is the states that started doing better. You said you would get to the reasons why that would happen.
Yeah,
so that's
thanks.
Just take 2 more questions.
Yeah, why not? Let's finish this.
You pose the question about, is there a PDS revival? Now, your data will not allow you to answer this question. To talk about revival, you need at least 3 points. So you say it was good earlier, it became bad, and then it revived. I mean, with 2 points, you cannot say, you can answer this. Just one thing. This second thing is about Chhattisgarh, and Chhattisgarh thing has been bothering me since, we had public lecture in which Aruna Roy had come and she also mentioned that. See, on the one hand, we'd like to portray Chhattisgarh as the hell. Where the state is the most depressive. It did all it could to deny Singh Salva Judhwan. So on the one hand, we say that the people are so alienated, the state is so oppressive and whatever, that people have no option but to go to the Naxals. On the other hand, a state which has so many remote areas where you still cannot reach within less than a day's, foot walk, and there you say that state has, registered the most spectacular, change within 5 years. Now, you have BJP government there, and it has all kind of agendas there. Now, I just don't understand how these two sets of, facts come together.
Okay, can I quickly answer those? So, a lot of these people that we spoke to, they're also migrants. The migrants don't just migrate forever and ever. They do keep going back and forth. And what may happen is that some members migrate, some stay back, things like that, yeah? So, I have not worked on migrants specifically and what their views are, and maybe I think it's an interesting thing to actually go and ask them, would you prefer to have a ration card so that your family that stays behind still has access to rations, or would you prefer to move to a cash system? I don't know the answer to that. It's true that with cash there will be the portability option, and that in the case of food it's more difficult to achieve that because of the way allocations are made across states and across villages. But I don't think it's impossible if we want to bring that kind of portability in. That's all I can say, because this is not something I know very much about. Now, on this, I do think that the time for cash has not come. So in that sense, I agree with you. But why has the time for cash not come? I would say even before thinking about the financial inclusion problem, which can be fixed quite easily, for me, the learning from this survey is that the time has not come because people are still so poor that they're still worrying about whether or not I will be able to eat at night. So there was one man who said that, doesn't matter if I fall sick or if I don't get work on a particular day, if I'm getting my ration from the ration shop, I have that peace of mind that I can go and eat my roti with salt, or I can eat mar bhat. Yeah, so in a situation where they are haunted almost by the specter of hunger, I think that's why the time for cash has not come, because cash will make you a little bit more vulnerable to that sort of insecurity. And you're right, and then the next step is to fix the financial inclusion step. And I think the reason why we sort of zero in on that, because we know that's easier to fix, right? I mean, doing financial inclusion, we saw a huge amount happen because NREGA wage payments moved from cash to banks. And because those problems are more tractable, we kind of feel कि हाँ उसको करते हैं. But for me, really the serious problem, when I go to Jharkhand, the first day I am able to eat properly, but by the third meal that I eat in Jharkhand, I lose my appetite because I just can't take in any more of this parboiled rice with this watery dal. It's basically you're eating salt and mirchi and boiled rice. So what do you do about that kind of deprivation in this country? And that's really and that's why the time has not come. Why is it an either-or question? And you're right that if we had the sort of administrative capability to implement a system where people could pick, this month I need food, that month I need cash, or I am always likely to need food, so you give me a food card, and I am not likely to need food, so you give me a cash card. That would of course be great. But the fact is we don't, in most parts of the country, I feel we don't have that kind of administrative capability to be so flexible, yeah. And across states also, maybe Bihar should be, I haven't thought hard enough about it, that let Bihar, because it's so keen on cash transfers, let them try it out and let's see how it works. But I would still feel a little bit nervous because this is a completely new thing and it's bound to have teething issues, and it's not going to be a smooth ride the way we think. I feel I may be wrong, but maybe it's worth trying out. The reasons for the revival. So the way I do it is to say that there are two sets of factors that are at work. One is working on the demand side, and one is working on the supply side. The demand side is basically putting pressure from below on the PDS. So states have moved towards universalization. They've said we don't care about these 1993, 94 poverty rates. If the government of India is giving us only 20 lakh BPL cards, doesn't matter. We are going to give another 10 lakh BPL cards from our own budget. Yeah, and so they've expanded the PDS. The number of people that are covered has increased, and therefore it's become a little bit more difficult for the ration shop guy to shoo people away or do things like that. The other thing that's put pressure from below is that a lot of states have reduced PDS prices. In Tamil Nadu it's 0, Andhra it's 1, Chhattisgarh is 1 or 2 or 3 depending on which, and the central government actually asked them to sell it at 4 and 6 rupees, something like that. So, so what used to happen earlier is that, the market price was 6 rupees or 8 rupees and the PDS price was 5 rupees. So for every kilo that I got cheated, I was losing 2 or 3 rupees. I said, forget it, who's going to cry for 2 or 3 rupees? Now what has happened is that PDS price has come down, market price has gone up. So for every kilo that I get cheated, I stand to lose 15, 20 rupees. So even the completely destitute, they say doesn't matter, let him beat us up today, but we'll get our grain from him and we are not going to let it go. So that's the other thing that's put pressure from below. And then the third thing which is happening in smaller pockets, these two are quite widespread, is the inclusion of other commodities. So Tamil Nadu, Andhra and Himachal Pradesh give up to 2 pulses and edible oils. Chhattisgarh has included chana dal now in Sarguja division and Bastar division, so it covers about half of the state. So a lot of states have, so that basically creates more of an interest in the PDS. It's not just about this dal chawal anymore. And for pulses, the pulses are really something people care about because of this inflationary pressure. So that's the demand side. On the supply side, the things that have been done is to break the nexus between dealers and politicians, that corrupt nexus that I'll give you the ration shop dealership, you make money, and when election comes and I need help, then you help me, that kind of thing, and I'll condone all your corrupt practices. That nexus has been broken, and what they've done is they've started asking panchayats to run ration shops, they've asked self-help groups to run ration shops. The registrar of cooperative societies is appointing someone. So Tamil Nadu, all ration shops are run by the registrar of cooperative societies and they have a salesman. So that's one thing. They fix the commissions. Earlier you used to get 7 paisa per kg that you sold, now it's become 35 paisa per kg. So if you're a dealer and you want to run the ration shop honestly, you are able to do it because the number of cards is more and the commission per card is higher. Another thing is the computerization. That has really streamlined the functioning of the system and improved administration of it in a massive way. So there are similar things that have fixed the supply side. On the revival, you said you need 3 data points. So actually there are 3 data points. If you look at 2001 to or 99 2000, so it has gone from the leakages went from whatever 40-ish to 50 to 40. Yeah, so there is, so if you go back in time, you will find that in the pre-1997 period when targeting was introduced, the system was not as bad as it became by the time of 2004-05, and now it's sort of going back to where it used to be, which was not great, but still it was better than what happened between 2000 2004-05. Yeah. So that's one thing. And on Chhattisgarh, actually it's a very tricky thing, and always when we say Chhattisgarh has done well on the PDS, we also say even though one is not at all comfortable with its record on human rights violations and the repressive nature of that state. Now how do we reconcile these things? I think a lot of people in Chhattisgarh, including Binayak, will say that basically it's a strategy to keep people quiet and then to do all this questionable stuff on the side. Yeah, that if you're keeping people well fed, then the likelihood that they will make a ruckus or will notice that their lands are being taken away or whatever is somewhat reduced. Now I feel that, so I'm not sure what your question is, but let's talk afterwards because I think there are more. But I do feel that, I have not been to Bastar, by the way. But this data on NSS is all over Chhattisgarh. And it's quite likely that the Bastar division does worse than the other divisions. Most of my work is in Sarguja, but a little bit here and there as well, but not in Bastar. But the fact is that, I mean, if you're questioning that this is happening in the remotest parts of Chhattisgarh, barring Chhattisgarh, Bastar, which I don't know anything, I mean, I've never seen. The other parts, I am willing to say that it's actually happening, and it's really amazing when you see it. I mean, you see these people going with their bicycles every month. I have lots of pictures also. And you're right that these places are very remote in many, but the rice is reaching. And this is mainly because of this very clear message from the top that don't muck with the PDS. Yeah, it's a little bit like, sorry, this is a funny anecdote. So I should tell you that in Jharkhand, I happened to be at a demonstration at a block office, and these people were protesting about whatever. And then it was about pensions, and very old people who had come. And then this woman, old woman, she said, "Aapne mera Indira Awas ka sanction nahi kiya, Indira Awas Yojana housing." So the BDO got very angry. She said, "मैंने कितनी बार तुमको बोला है कि इंदिरा आवास योजना का पैसा मैं नहीं खाती हूँ." So everything else is fair game, but Indira Awas, I have said, and I made it very clear that. So that kind of, and I think in different states, the different schemes are adopted as their own. Yeah. It is really amazing. I wish I had recorded it. Many states have brought it down in order to bring more people under the PDS. So in Rajasthan, they've given 10 lakh, 11 lakh more ration cards, but they've brought down from 35 to 25, irrespective of the family size. At least 2 states, as far as I know, are doing per capita, Andhra and Tamil Nadu. So the minimum a household can get is 4 or 6 kilos. I think it's different in the 2 states, and the maximum is 20. So if you are up to 5, or even if you're 10, you cannot get more than 20. Yeah. So there is some scheme for per capita entitlements.
Okay. A percentage of beneficiaries in different states. I actually couldn't understand why you have taken the whole population, because I mean the subsidies are given only to the targeted population, and in a way it actually ideally assumes that the rest of the population, quote unquote, I mean have the purchasing power to buy at the market price. So I couldn't understand why you have taken those population also.
I was expecting that this survey or study would have actually, some states from northeast India also. And my particular question is, there are certain states in northeast, and they are absolutely, nil in terms of production of grains, right? And if you choose to replace the grains with cash, then my experience goes, as per my experience being an inhabitant of the place goes, that the PDS has been at least able to keep the prices of grain stable, right? Yeah. So if we replace the grain with cash, I wonder how the prices, and in terms of transportation, there are states which are extremely unapproachable, and it completely depends on seasonal things, seasonal transport. So what is your take on this? Particularly northeastern states save Assam.
I wanted to ask if leakages includes the damage caused to grain due to the faulty storage system.
Yeah. Okay, let me quickly answer this. Leakages, I should have qualified that the way I have done it is the upper limit on leakage. Yeah, because it includes storage losses, it includes transportation losses, and perhaps if certain amount of grain is sitting in warehouses in the state government, with the state government, it also is ascribed as a leakage. So what I'm showing you is the maximum possible. Yeah, that so it's not the lower limit, it's the upper limit. So I'm being very generous in ascribing it all to. So I'm playing it safe, that people shouldn't say, oh, just because you're a supporter of the PDS, you're reducing the leakage. In fact, I've made it as much as is possible to make it. Okay. On the northeast, actually, this last year was the first time I think that we were able to go to non-Hindi speaking states. So we are quite pakka about doing these surveys. It's really difficult if you don't have people who are able, even in Hindi, when the students who do surveys, by the way, I should mention that all these surveys are done by student volunteers who study in Delhi University, Bangalore, blah, blah, blah. Even for me, initially, when I went to rural areas, to understand those local dialects in Hindi is not easy. It takes a while to get used to it. Yeah, and then if you send urban children urban students, young adults who are not used to those kinds of dialects, it becomes very difficult, and your survey is then you're just doing it for the heck of it. And so we are very careful in that sense, and that's one of the reasons why Northeast is not in it. The other is also, I mean, it's a completely unfamiliar area. One wouldn't even, I don't even know what to imagine, because I have never seen, and we've just not ever been able to go because of language barriers. Even the South very often gets left out, because actually there is quite a lot we can learn from the South, because these are the better, I mean, comparatively speaking, these are the better performing states, apart from Kerala, from Karnataka, I think. Your question about the baseline. See, the thing is that who is eligible is decided by this really ridiculous poverty measure and poverty line, yeah? So if I do it the way you're saying, is to use the government poverty line and then to look at inclusion and exclusion, that's the graph that I said I didn't have, but I could fish it out. So if you're keen, then I'll do it now, yeah? But the way we have done it is basically saying that we don't believe in this poverty line, yeah? And that it's very difficult to actually say who is entitled and who is not entitled. So again, we are being very conservative. Yeah, we are taking the most conservative possible way of doing things. Yeah, but if you want, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. See, let me just show you. So if you want to look at exclusion errors, portion of the population, okay, so this is the proportion of the population that has no PDS purchase, yeah, and they belong to the poorest quintile. So basically, if you divide the entire population into 5 equal parts, 20, 20, 20, 20, you take the poorest 20%. So those are entitled, yeah. And also of that, in 2004-05, 68% were not getting anything, and 2009-10, 47% are not getting anything, yeah. So it's sort of the same. It doesn't make such a big difference.
Okay, but in case of this cash transfer, then also only the targeted population would be given the cash. It's not the whole population, because it's not the universal.
No, I don't think so.
So anyway, the loophole would be there. I mean,
yeah,
the 13
absolutely. Yeah. Unless you find a way of making your biometrics, when you put your thumbprint and then it beeps and it says poor, 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 poor. But as far as I know, that technology doesn't exist. Yeah.
Some of the families are holding some 3-4 ration cards and they are getting something around 150 or 160 kgs of rice or grains.
Yeah.
And they're keeping some of the quantity for them and they're selling in the open market.
Yeah.
And even some of the poor families are still, they don't have the ration cards. Then how do you look into that?
Okay. So this evidence on ghost cards. So if you see this slide, sorry, I'm ready with all my numbers. So first of all, the evidence on the proportion of total cards in circulation that are either ghost or duplicates is very thin. Yeah, we don't have any proper data on this. Whatever little data is there, that suggests that between 2 to 13% of cards in circulation are either non-existent or deceased people, or the type of people that you're talking about, that I'm entitled only to 1, but I managed to get 6. So that's a smaller chunk of the population. Now, some states have started getting around this problem. What they do is they do annual or every 2 years they have a verification drive, and they go and they eliminate any duplicates that they find. The way Tamil Nadu does it is that if you, so basically in Tamil Nadu, the way the system works is that you can choose whether you want a rice card or a non-rice ration card. Yeah. So if you are an IIT professor and you say, hey, this subsidy is not for me, I'm quite capable of taking care of myself, but I still want the ration card because it's a very important ID proof, you can pick that non-rice ration card. Yeah. And then if you have a rice ration card, or the one that entitles you to all these commodities, then if for 3 consecutive months you don't lift your grain, then they cancel your card. Yeah, and then you have to reapply. So they found ways of, and then of course they have these annual verification drives, and because the systems are computerized, it's much easier for them. Whereas if you go to your state like UP, you will find that there is one BPL list with the ration dealer, there's a second BPL list with the sarpanch, there's a third BPL list with the block office, there's a fourth BPL list that is uploaded by the district administration on their website, and I think there is a fifth one which is uploaded in Lucknow. And very often the names, numbers will not match. Yeah. So this is where you need to apply technology, is to fix. I mean, it's such a simple thing to do, is to come. And today, in today's day and age, why would you want to maintain manual records for these sorts of things? Of course, electricity is an issue in Uttar Pradesh, so you have to be a bit careful. But still, at least at the district level, they can do computerization. Yeah.
Despite of huge success of PDS system in India, the problem of malnutrition was worse in India. The PM said that it's a national symbol. Do you think that government should take a risk to apply the cash transfer system? If not, what are the limitations?
Okay, so like I said at the beginning, this problem of undernutrition in India, for that what we really need to do is to target children who are still under the age of 3 from the time that they are born. And we have to focus on maternal health. Yeah, we have to make sure that women, so basically you have to start when girls are in their teenage, make sure they get adequate nutrition and nutrition education. When they're pregnant, women need to have antenatal visits to the doctor. They need iron and folic supplements. 60% of Indian women, like are anemic. Yeah. So you need to focus on pregnant and lactating mothers, and you need to focus on 0 to 3-year-olds. Yeah. So in that sense, the PDS is like a secondary intervention. It's, as I see it, it's more a food security rather than a nutrition security intervention. And the extent to which it can be a nutrition intervention is because if I am able to get my wheat and rice at my cereal consumption at a very low price, then it frees up a little bit of my food budget to buy more nutritious items. Yeah. So if I save, like in Tamil Nadu, if I save 100 rupees a month because I'm getting this cheap rice, then I might use it as a pregnant woman to get my iron supplements, or I might eat more green leafy vegetables or dals or whatever it is. And to that extent, the PDS can be helpful. And that's the part, like I said, that's the most interesting part, the nutrition aspect, which I have not yet, I don't have anything to show yet. Yeah? Yeah.
Question. Clarification is the central government transfer money or transfer grain?
Sorry?
The central government.
No, so basically the way the FCI works is initially 80% was being bought in Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, and then it would be transported all across. Yeah. Now as we move towards a more decentralized procurement system, like in Chhattisgarh, the grain is bought within the state, so the government transfers money.
So that means the possibility to move to a coarse grain or coarse cereal is higher now.
Yes, yes.
Because it's already the systems are in place.
Yeah.
The second thing which I wanted to actually ask a question in terms of, you talked about supply and demand factors. Isn't it possible to have a comparison across states in terms of supply characteristics which links to better performance? Like for example, Tamil Nadu, or even says simple demand characteristics where it's targeted, actually the performance is worse. And where it's non-targeted, universal, the performance is better.
Yeah, can I show you?
Simple comparisons can make it very clear.
Yeah, let me show you something that's related to what you're saying. this is a scatter plot between, oh, this is poverty reduction. Okay, anyway, this sort of gets to what you're saying, is that here you, on one axis, you're measuring how many people you've reached. So this is that pressure from below kind of measure. And on the other hand, you're measuring the outcome, which is reduction in poverty. Yeah. And what do you find? You find a very clear pattern. Yeah. That the higher, oops, I've got the axis wrong. No PDS purchase. Sorry. So it's fine. So the higher the exclusion, the lower the poverty reduction, and the higher the inclusion, the higher the poverty reduction. Yeah. This is one way of doing it. The other one is, so now this looks again at the same thing, but looking at, so these are official PDS. If you look at the food ministry data on how many households are covered by the PDS, again you get that sort of, well, this is not as clear as the previous one. And then, so yeah, it's possible to do those sorts of things, and I'm working on it. Actually, I want to be, see, you know, there's one question which I always get, which I didn't get today, which is that I said that, you know, when the market price and the PDS price are so close to each other, then I don't really care. Okay, theek hai, idhar se nahi liya, udhar se liya, that kind of thing. But when it's so high, then I will fight for it. But if you look at it from the point of view of the ration dealer, he's also thinking like that. When it's 1 or 2 rupees difference, then he's not making that much from each kg. When it's a higher difference, then he has even more incentive to steal. So basically there are two opposing, yeah. Now what we have seen in Jharkhand is that when the margin is so high, then suppose that, so this is like economics, yeah. If I'm not a profit maximizer, but what I'm trying to do is just to maintain a certain income, yeah. So if I want to make 10,000 rupees from my PDS shop, in the 1 rupee difference scenario, I have to siphon off 10,000 kgs, right? If I'm in the 10 rupee difference scenario, then to make 10,000 rupees, I have to siphon off only 1,000. So in fact, I can make the same amount of money siphoning off less, yeah? Even if I say I'm very greedy, I say, okay, now I want to make 20,000 rupees, even then you know, so there are these two opposing factors, and maybe the dealers are thinking, chalo, we'll take 2 kilos from each person, we'll still be better off, and we'll have lesser risk of getting caught or, you know, someone blowing the whistle on us. So I don't know why I got into this. Yeah, so I want to work on these sorts of issues that, you know, what is the price effect doing? Is it leading to greater corruption or lower corruption? And what is the inflection point and all that boring stuff?
I just had one question. You said that you know, political will matters. And I was just wondering if you can shed light, at least on like Chhattisgarh and so that. What is the mechanism of political will that makes it matter? You know?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, so this is heard second or third hand. So I'm not really, and I'm, you know, this kind of work is not my area. But what happened is, I've heard, is that there was a by-election in Chhattisgarh in which Ajit Jogi's wife was contesting. And it had become a prestige issue for the Chhattisgarh government, and Raman Singh himself was taking personal interest because they wanted to defeat the Congress candidate. BJP lost. So then he had some kind of review meeting, and he was told that the reason why you have lost is because your PDS is in a shambles there. So he said, okay, fine, if I can lose an election because the PDS doesn't work, then I can win an election if the PDS works. So he got 2 or 3 people together and he said, yeah, you just do what it takes to fix the PDS. So then they said, acha, now you put these people in jail. Now, so these 50 odd ration dealers were caught and they were put in jail. They appealed, and their dealerships were cancelled. So they appealed in the High Court. Now, it turns out that the guys were supported or protected by somebody who was a minister at that time. So the minister told the chief minister and said, Bhai, what's going on? So he said, okay, fine, let me think about it. And so he talked to his team and he said, what should I do? They said, no, they're bad eggs. You don't do anything. So he stuck to his ground. That minister apparently left the cabinet and he left the BJP. But still this chap said, okay, nay, I will not. And that really sent a message right down that, it's not going to be tolerated. And of course, he put lots of mechanisms, not he, but that team that was working on the PDS, they put lots of mechanisms in place. So like now, even in those rural areas, pretty remote villages, when we talk to people, we said, how is it working now? So he says, yeah, now we go to the tehsildar. I mean, this is something we were told by these officials who worked in that team and fixed the PDS. They said, we have made the tehsildar the authority for appeal for grievance redressal. And we were like, yeah, right. We've heard that before. You may make anyone, but what poor farmer a poor laborer is going to go to a tehsildar and to the block office and say, I've been cheated. But we do come across people, and every time I hear it, I feel a bit shocked. I said, wow, these people have actually gone. And they're not associated with any Sangathan or NGO. They just go on their own. Maybe 2 or 3 of them get together and go just as protection for each other so that they don't get targeted. So they've put certain mechanisms in place, helplines, toll lines, that kind of thing. They've painted lots of numbers on the ration shops so that people know where to go. That kind of thing has happened. And then I think initially they put a few people in jail and they stuck to their ground, and that sent a message. And then after that, either people, the guys who were being corrupt, they said, okay, now let's find greener pastures, or, maybe they yeah.
I just want to know, on the one hand, we have extreme poverty. On the other hand, it is often said that finding laborers, especially in agricultural field, is becoming more and more difficult. When people are getting rice with highly subsidized rate, they are becoming lazy. So how do you think that improvements in PDS system, when we don't know who is really needy, who is really eligible, I think it will be more problematic.
Okay, so suppose you got a job that pays you 1 lakh rupees a month, yeah? Would you stop aspiring for a job that pays you 2 lakh rupees a month? I'm asking you. You'll still aspire for 2 lakh? So if you're giving these poor people some grain, you think, bas. So see, these people are pretty poor, yeah, and what the grain is doing to them is it's making...
I'm just asking, what is the real scenario?
I can't answer that question, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, fine. Yeah. Okay, so let me give the Chhattisgarh example then. So in Chhattisgarh, this is exactly the fear that people will bring up, that you're giving cheap rice, so everyone will sit and stop growing the grain. But what the government is also doing is it's buying the rice to be able to supply it. Yeah? And it's buying it at 12 rupees, it's supplying it at 2 rupees. So if I have any land, I will say, fantastic, I'll sell to the government at 10. And even if I'm not included in the PDS, I still have an assured market. And if I'm included in the PDS, even better. Although I don't think there is a very neat match between the guys who sell and the guys who get it. And also when there is a neat match, in MP I've heard that the grain that they grow for FCI is different from the wheat that they grow for themselves. They grow a better quality wheat for themselves and they grow the quality that they know FCI is going to buy. Yeah, so and what has happened also in Chhattisgarh is that as they have been procuring for the PDS, they have also found a little bit of an improvement in the production levels. Yeah. And this is data I have not examined, but I have been told that this is what is happening. So this is something that needs to be investigated. But I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that people will stop producing. Because from the point of view of the farmer, having an assured market and a decent price means great, because now we can sell. Yeah. So that the different ways it can work out. It may work out the way you're saying. And I've heard that in coastal Andhra Pradesh, like many acres of land are lying fallow because people just can't afford to hire labor anymore and all that. So it must be very different across the country, and I'm certainly not competent to answer for everything and everyone. But these are the bits that you see both sides happening. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think we should close it.